coming up on America's Hope, building bridges of hope throughout the Middle East, in particular Israel. We'll be talking to Jonathan Feldstein of Genesis 123 Foundation, as well as Lana about Transform Iran. And we'll also speak with Luke Moon of the Philo Project. All that and more starting right now. Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright, and this is America's Hope, and we do hope that wherever you are, that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. Let's face it, the world is a troubled place. There's a lot of wars and rumors of wars going on, and there are some families who are not safe at all. Talking most particular about what's happening in the Middle East right now. You see, the Biden administration seems to be growing more frustrated and more at odds with the way the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is conducting the war in Gaza. And pro-Palestinians in Hollywood, for example, stood out on the streets protesting outside of Hollywood's Oscar ceremony, demanding a ceasefire. While inside, some actors actually wore lapels calling for a ceasefire. And then there's this moment. Director Jonathan Glazer of the movie The Zone of Interest, a movie about the Holocaust. Accepting the Oscar, Glazer says, don't use our Jewishness and Holocaust to justify the Gaza war.
Whether the victims of October the 7th in Israel or the ongoing attack on Gaza, all are victims of this dehumanization. How do we resist?
Think about that. As people look at this, it's quite clear and evident that there are emotions on both sides of the spectrum. But let's not forget how this war started. It actually began on October 7th of last year, when so many Hamas rebels flooded the kibbutzes and destroyed life, innocent people. Now, the retaliation has been swift and it's been brutal. But the bottom line is Israel does have a right to defend itself. But the rise in anti-Semitism that we're seeing throughout this country is cause for concern. Tonight we'll be talking to people who live in the region of Israel or have some experience about what's happening in Israel as well as Iran. Why Iran? Well, because many people who have actually studied this war realize that the culprit here is from Iran. Make no mistake about it. Iran has made it very clear that they view Israel as the little Satan and the United States as the big Satan. And Israel has funded and fueled the passions of Hamas, which carried out that disastrous atrocity that took place on October 7th. So make no bones about it. There is a culprit here. And you'll hear that in tonight's information from the various people that we'll talk to. Jonathan Feldstein of Genesis 123 Foundation joins us tonight. And we'll also hear from Lana, who's involved in an incredible program called Transform Iran. And then we'll hear from Luke Moon, an American who's working on behalf of the Israeli citizens. So let's get started. Jonathan Feldstein is a veteran nonprofit executive whose career has spanned 3 decades, representing several major organizations whose common denominator is supporting diverse, important projects going on in Israel as we speak, combining an entrepreneurial instinct and passion for marketing and fundraising. Jonathan has initiated and led many successful fundraising campaigns, raising tens of millions of dollars. Now, the thing about Jonathan is that he was born, raised, and educated here in the U.S. Jonathan and his wife and 5 oldest children made Aliyah in 2004. And in 2005, they were blessed by the birth of their first native-born Israeli son. Congratulations, Jonathan. Good to have you. Look, when you celebrated Aliyah to go back to Israel, what was that experience like for you? Let's start right there.
Oh, you want to make me cry right at the beginning of the conversation. It's a homecoming. First of all, my father was born here. So I was a dual citizen from day one. My father was born in what then they called Palestine, when they referred to Jewish people as Palestinians in 1937. And so I'd wanted to live here since I was a child. I wanted to be one of the beneficiaries of this incredible gift that God gave to Abraham and his descendants through Isaac and Jacob, the land and the promises, and not to be a spectator on the sidelines, but really to be on the front line. And well, maybe that's an inappropriate analogy, although probably very appropriate considering that we're in the midst of a war. But I will tell you, even with the war, we're coming on 20 years this summer. There's no place I would rather live, raise a family, and now my next generation, 3 grandchildren and counting.
What's it been like for you and the people of Israel as this war with Hamas rages on? And let me point out, it's happening because of what took place on October 7th of last year.
Correct. Well, it's happened. The trigger was October 7th, but the ideology, the Islamic ideology that calls for the annihilation of Israel and the Jewish people has. Who actually this past week we just observed the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution from 45 years ago, and that's ultimately the source of all of this. Now, what we're dealing with, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, are all Iranian proxies. I will tell you that it's very stressful here. It was much more stressful when my son and my son-in-law were serving in Gaza. They were both called up on October 7th in reserves, and wow, that was scary. And I didn't sleep well for 4 months, especially the 2 months straight that they were in Gaza. And it's stressful. It's scary. There's a good bit of anger involved. And nevertheless, and this is a strange thing, people who this is my first major experience with being in a war and that close to me, the amount of unity, the amount of solidarity, not just here domestically, but because I have the privilege of working with Christians all over the world, I'm so strengthened by the love, the encouragement, the support, the prayers that we're getting from all over the world. And that's uplifting, and it allows me to see some of the goodness even in these very dark times.
The light in the darkness is what you're talking about, my friend. And Jonathan, I should also point out here that you now serve as president and CEO of the Genesis 123 Foundation, whose mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. With the Christian Arabs, what are you hearing from them in terms of what's happening with this?
Right. So it's a very good question, Kelly. I've got very close friends. I mean, really like family, who are Christian Israeli Arabs, and I've made more friends over the years, and that's super important. And one of the challenges, which bothers me tremendously as an Israeli Jew, that Christian Arabs are persecuted in Israel by Muslim Arabs who are Israeli citizens. I was just having the conversation today, actually on the way to the president's residence, presenting my book to him, and we were talking about the lawlessness that exists in much of the Arab society, and unfortunately, Christians represent a minority here and are persecuted as a result. And one of the things that's so important that what we do with the Genesis 123 Foundation is to stand in solidarity with Christians throughout the Middle East, because it's not easy being a Jew in the Middle East, and it's not easy being a Christian in the Middle East. And this war and the hate that comes from this radical Islam necessarily and should push us together as closer brothers and allies.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far of America's Hope. If you'd like to see it in its entirety, just click on the link below. Thanks for watching.